He is a renowned architect. Yeah, welcome, sir. He is working for last 35 years as an urban designer in our country, and he is the proprietor of alternative, appropriate alternative. Is the name. It's the name of his firm, and he is awarded for many projects like Mon Chasha, which is the rural uh, tourism project, and he was also awarded for many low-cost housing awards. Thank you, sir, for joining us in this webinar. Thank you. Welcome, sir. We have our interior students over here. They are keen to know about your experiences and about your work.
Good afternoon, everybody. And supposed to be an exploration of a journey of understanding what is design. But it was initially thought of like an Adda session because this is a kind of a complete, complex issue to be able to understand. So the way actually I am trying to do, because it's almost like speaking to a wall. So it is very difficult to actually gauge the participants' reactions or otherwise. So what I'll do is I'll almost be a tourist guide who will actually pass through and explore a kind of an uncharted path, and with a lot of visuals so that you can actually relate to what I will be talking to, because the subject is as opposed to some kind of a very serious, heavy burdened issue. That is not the way I would like it to be, because it will be a fun of being a designer, and that is exactly what I am intending to do. To start with, we actually start with a comment from Yuval Harari on Homo sapiens. He was saying that Homo sapiens were different from other animals is because they have, one is imagination, and second is they can tell stories, and that is what actually make them completely apart from other beings, living beings around. I want to expand it a little further, because throughout this, if you really see and chart the development process, it is the another instinct which actually is guiding human beings to survive and come to the stage, and that is exactly the way to innovate, to identify and create an opportunity of making things according to their own choice and survival, which is I call is the design instinct. So because right from the foragers, if they, when they were fighting against the more powerful larger animals, they have to tackle it because only with their brain. So what they do is they shape the stones to a particular size. Sometimes it is pointed so they have a deeper penetration, sometimes it is flat so that it can cut, sometimes they strategize so to trap that, so they use the kind of geometry, and so this is the way they kind of completely innovate around. So according to, along with her aspect of storytelling, I think the design instinct is also one of the major tools that has differentiated Homo sapiens from other animal kingdom. So, and this, the if you see in the screen, this is the way of actually when we talk about design, we also have to narrate a kind of a deeper understanding of life and its philosophy around. So the way we try to express this is all is in the process of design. Now, let us see a very simple, take a very rudimentary heart from a area. Everything, the way they store, the way they use, the way their necessities are, the way each and every element is being done is inherent in their kind of a philosophy of life and being existent. So this is something that is exactly what we are going to deliberate, because nowadays we are living in a very fragmented world. So we try to keep it in different kind of silos, and thereby we are missing the overall link that is what an essential part of an understanding of what the design process is. Now let us start with the manifestations. On the right side, what you see is the very agricultural tools that people have invented in the almost like prehistoric ages. Now, these are the tools when they first thought that they want to get settled. So, if they want to settle, they have to really don't go around. So, there will be agriculture. Now, to do agriculture, they have to invent different types of tools to be able to really till the earth, put the things, cut it down, threshing it. So, there are so many ideas that came in, and in order to make it useful, they have to invent this kind of tools. So they have to engage in this design element. So that is one. From that, so tool is the first thing that of required for any kind of intervention, be it craft, be it other kind of daily acts. It is necessary. From there, what we see is if we go around, then we see the this tool, the design is also being modified, being modernized, has become more utilitarian, very functional. But somehow that human connect is slowly, because it is now basically more industrialized, so there is mass production, and as a result, that human connect is slowly getting down. But this is a process of design, and now what is the domain of our industrial designers? From there, if you come to the surgical tools, it is even more precise, exactly pinpointed to do their necessary work. So from this, so this is like the very starting point. From there, if we come back to basic utilitarian things like our cutleries, our utensils, everything, on your left, right is the Chinese pot. Now, you see the amount of elaboration because the tea itself was a major kind of a social act. So they have given a lot of attention to that utensil. Slowly, if you take through the time, as people are spending less and less time in these daily acts and kind of delegate on something, automatically its reflection, that human connectedness, also kind of getting slightly subdued, and it is getting more modernized, more streamlined to something that we are having it now. Next comes is people have to present themselves. Ultimately, human beings are social beings. So the way they carry themselves, carry in the public place, so there is certain kind of norms that is they have followed, certain kind of climate that has to suit them. So accordingly, the dress over the period also has evolved. Now, these are all a part of design process that is helping them to come across the terms of time and the circumstances and as well as their use. From there, we come down to very basic things of like chair. If you take some old cane chairs of the Victorian period, where materiality itself was so expressive and it was so elegant, and the way it has been connected. So from that, slowly the more you became more involved with brandings and branded furnitures and mass production, slowly that element is also kind of getting it down. And this is a trend that we can see from the history of architecture and the theory of design everywhere. We see this kind of evolutionary trend. Then the man's major evolution come when he actually started getting induced movement. Bicycles are something that wheel, the moment they have designed wheel, they have actually expanded a huge horizon in front of them. And this is because of that design instinct that is there. So from that, the basics are wheel, then how that can be physically operated, how that can be motorized, and slowly we move into the four-wheelers, which is like the mass-produced T4. Look at the same car if, as of today and then, because car at that time was really a very prestige kind of things, and people think that it has such an amount of cultural values, which is slowly now denominating into some kind of a social value itself. And that, so it is almost like a crafted element, even the way the horn is there, the way the headlights are there, the way the upholsteries are there, every place you will see the human involvement and as the part of the design process. Then slowly now, if you see all these tools and machines now, it is almost like coming into a box with very basic elements, which is coming. And so it is becoming a very utilitarian kind of thing. We don't really spend more time and thinking around it. There was a huge table which actually shows how the design of all these things have been evolved. Then we come down to the spaces which we inhabit. Now, this is the space which is a traditional Chettinad house. And if you see that there is nothing called, this is furniture design, this is the way the space is detailed, this is the structure design, this is the embellishment. Altogether, it is a form of design which kind of addresses a particular lifestyle, where outdoors and semi-indoors are become merged. So the philosophy around which these things is being built is simply integrated. The more we are making it specialized, the more we are getting it disconnected. From there, come down to the very modern elements of architectural design. Now you have Villa Savoy, from where the machine kind of living, machine kind of language of design vocabulary has started. So we, from there, we move into the skyscrapers, the Empire State Buildings, as well as then also there was this kind of a reactions to the other areas, which is, this is the interior is talking about a music room. So here they have gone back to again the basic roots of design and tried to fit in making a synergization of various elements instead of specialization and fragmentation. Now they are talking in terms of a very interesting vocabulary, and that is what really is very important part of this thing. How do you really build? This is, I mean, this is a section of the Pantheon, and here you can actually see the amount of detailing, the human passion, the way people will be aggregated, how they will be celebrating a space. Each and every detail is being thought of and worked together. So it is a design team. It is a complete design collaboration that is coming into scene. Nowadays, we tend to think that design is a kind of an individual thing, but it is not. Design, the way we have to think, if we have to represent life, life is not unidirectional. So therefore, it has to be thought as a kind of a multiple disciplinary kind of a system. And each one also always follows a similar kind of design rationale or a logic. Okay, so this is the, and frankly, having understood that these are the design elements, so then what? What do we do? Uh, the, the very basic way I can actually understand is when you have to gift something to somebody. Now, giving a gift is a kind of a internal gesture, but when you give a gift to somebody, it is for them that is destined. How do you choose? This is a very interesting proposition, and this is also takes to the heart of the design process. So you have to understand whom you are giving this gift. Is it a lady, or is it a boyfriend, or it is somebody who is very senior? So you have to really put them, you have to understand what is the kind of culture that they belong to, what will actually give them the maximum pleasure within this. So you have to really nurture, understand the person for whom the gift is being offered to. Second is, you also have to know at for what occasion you are giving. Is it for a anniversary, it is for a birthday, or it is for some kind of a excellence in something. So depending on the circumstances, there are kind of societal norms to it. So we also have to think that what kind of gift will be appropriate, and you do the things. And you have ample choices to choose from. How do you choose? So there comes that you must be having some kind of a budget assigned. So within that budget, which one of that gift will bring the maximum kind of a satisfaction or appreciation for the person whom you are giving. So now you are actually getting into a thinking process, a creative process. by which you are really thinking and working out for somebody. Now, this is an act of design. From there, I'll just come down. So basically, we have understood that in fact, in all the design process, a creative thinking is always being the problem of a major kind of a clue on which we should be able to build. Now, one thing we have realized, our life has never been very kind of straightforward and kind of easy. So any kind of problem that you figure out always has a kind of a relationship with something else. So it is not just one kind of a problem. It is a problem that is situated within a series of layers and complex. And this is the interrelationship that actually helps us to think that in what kind of combination it can actually be critically acclaimed to. So with this, then what is the happening here is that that is the critical understanding of issues involved. And we also have to know that this is kind of a very multi-layered, multi-dimensional is a thing, and it can be very physical or it can be abstract. Its experiences can be tangible, it can be intangible. So out of that, then you kind of work out various possibilities. And out of these possibilities, what is really happening around is that some possibilities you will have a better kind of an understanding to see. So with that, then what you come down to is a kind of, then you also weigh that, okay, with these choices, what is the kind of desired impacts that is going to be there. So based on this kind of, again, a kind of a critical analysis, you come arrive at that, okay, this particular thing for this particular time and this particular circumstances will give me the most desired effect. And that is what will be your design solution. So in any kind of situation, we are given a condition or a context, and our input as a designer is to identify exact spot where in that given condition one can intervene and in what manner. So this is a kind of a symbolic gesture that we have borrowed from the Rashmandal of Vishnupur, which actually says is that in the Rash, the center is where the key address of the key issues are, and around which there are layers of understanding that kind of goes back and forth and kind of interrelated. But everybody is actually dancing in the similar kind of tune. That harmony and balance is what is the way a design can work or it doesn't work. I think because design is essentially a very humanist experience. So I thought that this craftsman from Rajasthan actually says that in that particular setting with the thread, what is the kind of possibilities with that thread, how it can connect, who will wear that sarees or the draperies, and how in various form that can be used. So there is a chain of reactions which evolve out of just one act of design. So what is design? Now, design therefore is essentially a creative thinking process which engages holistically. That is what I'm saying, that we are not looking at only one single parameter. We are looking at a range of parameters to choose from. And from that, we are making the appropriate choice from these range of available options, and which is we are calling the design for that particular aspect. So, and why we will be doing it? Because design always it improves from the existing scenarios, it evaluates, and it always resolves the existing issues and create a new kind of activities. It creates more comfortable situation, it is more perceptible, it is very convenient, and finally it must leave a kind of a pleasing experience. And last of all, it always gives you a sense of completeness, that this is something that is not been complete, so let us make that is complete. I give you a very interesting kind of an analogy. uh, You walk around after Amphan, you have seen there are plenty of trees which is kind of inclined after the waves and other thing. It is just kind of inclined at a position. So when you see this, what is the first reaction that is? We always go and try to support it so that it doesn't fall back. Now, that kind of a situation which is created an imbalance, we are trying with our gesture is to create and restore some kind of a balance out of it. And that is a design choice and design decision. Suppose you are on a seaside and there is a huge wall, and you know next to that wall there lies a beautiful sea roaring up and down. And what will be your initial reactions? Is to create an opening so that you will be able to see, and thereby you can release to an outside experience which will become so refreshing and so relaxing. Now this opportune point of just creating that opening, that decision is a design decision. So this is the way actually we work out in the terms of design. So, and because it always brings a kind of joy, either who creates and also who receives. So there has to be fun. Right now, what we are trying to do is we almost labor it out, and thereby we forget what to enjoy. If you can't enjoy creating, then obviously that cannot be translated to the user. So the fun is first you have to live in, you have to experience it on yourself, and thereby you will be able to assist somebody to create that value. And that is the value of design. It changes. It always helps to cope up, to adjust, to collaborate. This is a very interesting, just on this line, this is a thing that we have kind of curated from a craftsman in Rajasthan. In Rajasthan, we all know camels are the basic means of livelihood. Now, because they also associated that value in the camel, that they are very interesting. So their appreciation is reflected in the way they adorn them. So they created where the camel backs there. So there is this rally which kind of on the right side. It also shows the connection of the humankind with various animals, which are basically helps us to do our daily life. Then they adorn it with a necklace, they adorn with your decorated bridle. So every other element is being designed. This is celebration of life, and that is exactly design does. And that is what we also would like to, as a designer, that we have. Design is the most dominant discipline in the future, and in fact it is also already a part of our present. I tell you why. You get up in the morning, so the first thing you do your morning course, and you will figure out that okay, this particular brand I am going to use, this is the things that I am using, this is the kind of mirror. And so each and element that you pick and choose, your toothbrush to everything, it's somebody has designed it for you. And because you are comfortable on that particular design, that is why you are appreciating it or using it. You get up, now you have to go up for work or other things, so you will be embarking on your breakfast. What will you have? You have so many cereals. So if you have to prepare your own breakfast, you will see where the maximum time is kind of optimized. So you will settle for something which you can assemble very quickly. But if you are in a traditional house, even that morning core is a family act. So somebody will be actually taking a lot of pain in making puri or something. So they are also thinking of what kind of breakfast or the things that can be served. Now it's time for you to go out. So from individual, you are going to become a public. Now, when the moment you are doing this public thing, you want to present yourself in the public. So you are very conscious of how would you dress up, what are the things that you will be wearing, what kind of fashion that you will be doing. Does it represent your social status? So there goes a range of decision that you have to pick up, and in that fine moment, either you pick it somebody's choice and you appreciate that, you adapt it, but you have to take that kind of a call all around. So from there, when you go to your workspace, how would you go? What kind of transport that you have? So will you be going for a public transport, or you will be going by your private bike, or you will be going your private vehicles? There the range of options that you will be choosing from. And after COVID, now you are well, so you know that physical distancing is one aspect. So what are the kind of options that I have? You have to choose in each of the part that you are making a decision, which is some or other reflected in the way we live. We go to our personal space. Now you will be allotted a kind of workspace. Now if you are a boss, so you will be attend a cubicle which are almost like a standardized size, say 5 feet by 10 feet or something to start with. But what you do there, you tend to personalize your space by bringing certain memorabilia, certain way of convenience, so that is easy to work with. So you are all the time, you are really doing something or other to make your life comfortable. Then you go for an entertainment. What do you go? So then again you will be faced with so many kind of choices and series. So all around, what we are saying is that design is something which will help you to, that influences the trends, the choices or the preferences. It kind of sets norms and standards, your behaviors, your values, your attitudes and your agendas. Or even it will change the meaning of development and the way you experience and express. Everything is all around us. So design is there, everything around us. We cannot touch anything that is not designed or not being thought of by somebody or by ourselves. So this is the kind of situation that we have when you have this us and the whole range of things. Now if you take this, starting from food, cuisine, even the fine dining, it's an experience. The moment experience comes, design comes. Your beliefs, your fashions, the textiles, the accessories that goes with the fashions, the events that you attend to, or else if you come in the buildings or the settlements, cities, the way the infrastructure is that will be operated, the landscape, the connections to the nature, or you come into the inside, which is purely your emotional content. How do you want to live? So furniture designs, the various products that you can, things, artifacts, art objects, paintings, communications, graphics. In fact, nowadays, even today, I have to really undergo series of kind of discussions within myself as how do I really communicate so that this idea can be spread across and help people to understand the world of design. Now, to, but all the design, there are basically, you can bring it down to basic three components. The first component is the user. Now, sometimes we face directly the user. Sometimes the user is being given to us via a client or a sponsor who is basically undertaking that kind of a job. But this is the people for whom actually any design intention is first expressed. Second component is the designer who is going to interpret this user and then define them according to what kind of things that has to be done. But between these two, both of them's dialogue, that is not the design that will come on. The other thing that will come in is the context, is the site, it is the object around which all these dialogues or all these discussions can hold this place. So between these three coordinates, actually there is a continuous contestations and a negotiation of ideas that comes in, and that begins the design process. So Now, if we put it, first is the client for whom. Now, that client can be an individual, cooperative, a developer or a promoter, a corporate sector, social sector, public sector, NGOs, community business organizations, etc. The purpose of this client is they will be actually identifying uh, the user group, the targets, the beneficiaries for whom this kind of journey should be undertaken. So they must be having a lot of intentions, the reservations. It can have a commercial interest, it can be an institutional interest, social and cultural institution, every other thing. So these are like the basic categories around which this user and beneficiary groups occupy. But these are the people for whom the design is initiated. The second thing is the scope is why. What we are going to do with it. The reason for getting there. It can be designing an objects, it can be an activities, it can be events, spaces, concepts, or it can be experiences. And third is the site context where this is going to be situated, which can be the basic constraints as well. It can have a site which can have a environmental constraint, it can have ecological constraints, physical context, social context, economic context, cost constraint, and to some extent memories and other context as well, which kind of gives a more intangible kind of a bearing. So with these stakeholders, now in the design process, what really happens is this is the kind of dialogues first start to take place. Now, this is a any kind of problem, as we have seen from our other discourses, has a series of layers. The more from the perimeter, the thinking process actually goes deeper and deeper inside, or the it is the other way around, that you know that this is the core and then you slowly connect it outwards. So this is a journey which is kind of introspection as well as retrospection. So in the given context, there may be several kind of choice. This circle is the constraint areas within which all these typical squares, you can put n number of squares within a circle. Only one particular circle will be orthogonal. Rest of the things are all is kind of touching the very parameters of the constraints. So they actually represent the number of choices that we have. But finally, the only one that goes towards the center, the orthogonal square, is the one we are really aiming it for. Now, the space circle constant is also kind of volatile. If this represents a particular temporal space, it is within the particular time. So the moment this actually goes around, then what you will be seeing is as how to really negotiate it further and develop the concept that you really have. So this is the design alternatives and this is the acceptable alternative. And this acceptable alternative is, it goes back to the very root, because it has to be something which gives pleasure, which gives something like joy, something like completeness. So it has to strike that balance between build and nature, between man and environment. It has to have that harmony, because everything has a rhythm. Without that rhythm, it is like Tal Shastra or a Nitya Shastra, where the right kind of tempo is hit when the rhythm on which they occur follows a kind of a regular pattern. And finally, it has to be implementable. It's not dream. Design has to be implemented, has to be felt, touched, experienced. So that is something that we will be requiring to do that. Now, so I'll now further elaborate on that. The category A is the client who commissions. Now, they commissions may be for financial gain, they commissions for social position, or they can be a personal choice. If the client is opting for a personal choice, probably he is an individual where user and the client are the same thing. But finally, this client also doesn't sponsor it or doesn't engage the people or the designers to do something, they have a target group in mind. If I am going to do a housing, it will be mainly for an affordable group, or it will be a middle income group housing. So they have their standard requirements, standard aspirations on which every other thing has to follow. So the user, where it is defined, where you can directly talk to, it is comparatively easier because you can gauge. But most of the cases or the commercial projects or a large scale projects or even the product designs are a thing that this user is not known. So what will you do? So you actually as a designer have to interpret this user in terms of their profile. What kind of profile they fit in? What is their behavioral pattern? What kind of aspirations they have? I mean, somebody wants to be aspired to live in a pakka house, whereas he cannot probably afford that because he is a simple farmer or something like that. So this is something that we always have to look into. The value systems, the certain things which are accepted, certain things which are not accepted. So within that values, we have to accept certain facts. In a very traditional, conventional house, we cannot really do away with a very kind of open-ended plan where there is the privacy constraint is very less. These are not kind of an acceptable because every society have their kind of norms and standards fixed to it. Affordability I have already discussed, and then there is a question of culture. Now, the user, when they are devotee, they actually believe in a different way of doing things, and when they are a normal, otherwise in the common daily ritual, they follow certain other things. So understanding the user is an essential component to know exactly what they require and how they will be benefited. So now these are something which is we actually take it from their designed environment, what kind of environment they live in. So that is their past acts, their preferences, and from there the conventions, what is acceptable to them, the relation to change, what is the kind of reactions they have done so far, what is the way the site and services in especially for the low income group, these are because their choices is so limited, but they always have that if you want to evict them from their common workplace, however bad ventilated or ill ventilated and bad light is there, but because their livelihood is rooted there, so they don't want to move. Now, these are kind of common psychology that we have to understand to be able to understand the user perspective, that what are the things we must do. So this gives, and whereas so designer is plays a go between role who understand their what their user want and then kind of establishes that dialogue to the client or the sponsor. So with that, then designers come with several kind of choice of preferences, design alternatives, and finally they set out some kind of an ideation that okay, this is one way. So I mean, geometrically speaking, one can be a circle, one can be a triangle, one can be a square, one can be a rhombus. There are plenty of kind of permutation and combination of these choices. And this is what we call is the number A. Now, A is the interpretive value. Then comes down to the scope, Y. Now, there is the designer. And this is the kind of scope that they come with things. So, they figure out what is the kind of basic requirement that they have to deal with. This is the category, that which category that fits in, that whether we are designing an attire or we are designing a product or we are designing a space or services, events, communication. These are like broad frame of operations, the very core on which the other things will be building up. And from there we interpret, this is called the design interpretations. And these are the things that is like that you have to frame out the design parameters that a designer is kind of negotiating, navigating within to be able to come up with a solution. So that can be the use of that what kind of meaning is associated with it, what is the kind of pattern that exists, what is the kind of activities that is being engaged in, what is the behavioral psychology behind all these activities, the kind of signs and symbols. Signs and symbols play a very significant role in kind of communicating a meaning or communicating a idea. And that is why even our gods, goddesses, the deities, everything is nothing but signs and symbols. So with which we actually lean around and figure out that, and also the all these activities thinks of it is to gain a kind of an experience. So that is the experience that we are really as a designer are much more interested to. And then this is balanced with its relationship with nature. That's what we are saying. The design process cannot be a unidirectional thing. It's a multi-layered collaborative kind of process. So it has to have what kind of relationship that has with the nature, with its existing context. They have this heritage, whether it's tangible or intangible. There is a traditional wisdom which kind of guides with this. There is innovation, there are memories, and there are failures. Some things that didn't work. If that didn't work, so probably that is something we can eliminate and try to weigh why that has failed. And from there, we figure out a clue as how to make it work. And then this finally, this is the C or the where. It is the object or a space or a site or a context. Now, this is a very interesting way of looking at it. Now, if we kind of define this boundary as the basic context within which that design has to be positioned. Now, this attribute B is what? It is almost like a living thing. We tend to always mistake it for a kind of a static objectives that I need to have a bedroom which is 10 by 12 size, 2 numbers with a kitchen which is 6 by 8. But that size alone is not really making that a bedroom. You have to have a bed, you have to have a way of your living, how much time you really spend in that bedroom, what are the activities you take apart from sleeping. All those things has to be calculated. In a kitchen, if you give to any kind of kitchen to people, they find it very, very disturbing, because if he's a bachelor, he wants his kitchen to be designed in some way which is very convenient to him, or whether if it is given to the housemates to do a kitchen service, it's of course it has to be a different way. So that is what I'm saying, that our requirements is almost like a living thing, and that is why in our traditional terms it is called Vastu Purush, but Vastu Purush exactly is kind of a embodiment of various emotions, acts, aspirations all put together in the form of a living being. And then he has to be adjusted within that, all with his all aspiration levels within these confines of a definite territory or a space or a product or whatever. So within this limit, it has to be fitting. And this is also interesting because our traditional wisdom is very interesting, because Vastu is the science of orientation actually. And we conceive the science that every orientation has a different kind of energy field. And because this energy field, we have various kind of gods and goddesses assigned to these kind of directions. So you know, northwest is Kubera. Now, Kubera stands for certain values. So all these directions also comes to us with certain amount of values. Now, when you put a living thing with this kind of a 3D mold of values, you actually try to think is almost like a living concept. And that is what essentially the design does. That is addressing it completely holistically. So this is the experiential beneficiary, physical entity, space object, and this is the Vastu Purush. But this, it has nothing to do with the Vastu Purusha Mandala. All I'm saying is it is for basic concepts that certain areas, certain attributes, because of Earth's radiation, because of its magnetism, because of so many other ether and every other things, it has a certain amount of energy value around it, and we are within, operating within. So this is a kind of a given directions. Now the purpose of all this exercise is to create experience. First is comfort. It has to be pleasant, convenient, memorable, and a sense of completeness. Now this experiences, initially it is identified by the client, the use function is defined by them, the associated values and intangible that we can operate, the site and context also is provided by the client. And then what the designer does, it tries to create, because all intervention will create some kind of a disturbance and a displacement. So how to create that balance? Bringing in harmony, that intervention is bound to change, but this change, how we can mitigate so that its impact is minimum. Strengthening the patterns, there always exists a pattern, whether that's a physical pattern or a social pattern or a cultural pattern. So we know that our intervention is going to impact on all this, and that is the reason design is, it's an engagement. It is an engagement, and design is not really the end product per se. It is the end product that we see is a part of an evolve, and that is how where we are leading it to. Like this, there are separate pieces all put together, but finally when you put in that right order, then it kind of completes a kind of frame and a picture, a vision. That is exactly the design does. It kind of helps to articulate a kind of vision. The qualities of a designer. So what is the quality of the who this designer should be? Now what I told you earlier, that there is designer in us in whatever form. For somebody who is motivated, there with his honing of skills, honing of your analytical base, and doing things right, so he takes the responsibility of deciding for others. So but internally at the micro level, we always are engaged in some kind of design form. But designer who is really taking it as a profession or as a discipline is somebody who is take this responsibility of meeting somebody else's requirements and put into a larger picture. So essentially, he has to be a good human being who is sensitive, who is aware, and who is empathetic. Because without that, he won't be able to realize what the user really wants and what is really good for him, and how he can make an argument against that, how you can actually benefit it from that. Because whenever there is a change, there bound to be some kind of a resistance, and that resistance can be only overcome by rational, by logic, and by going a sense further. So then he has to have some kind of a common sense. Now, because everything that we do is derived out of a very simple common sense. If something is not working, if he can understand why this is not working, it is so simple, just accept that. And that is the way it is, and it is very flexible, because what we designers always have this baggage of that I know everything, and that is a major problem. Because the moment you are saying that, you will be biased, and you will be making more kind of segmental or fragmental choice within yourself. So that way, your flexibility will create a major problem. Then he has to be very keen observer, because lot of clues and lot of information comes in the form of visuals, which are non-verbal communications. The way people do it, if there is no space on the inside, people actually try to encroach on the outside and use it for store or some things. So that is a kind of clue, some things which is not working. It is much better even without interviewing, if you see the way he's living, will give you exactly what is his profile, what is his aspiration, how best he can actually act on. So that is what he has to be perceptive enough to be able to generate the information base that is from their own surroundings, to be able to improve it. And finally, he has to be creative. Creative is not skill, creative is intelligence. You have to know exactly what kind of skill set you need to require, or where you want to seek an expert opinion if you require it. But you are making that kind of a choice for a client, and for that, whoever is possessing that kind of information or a skill set, we always have to be utilizing them. So your creativity lies in devising ways to go around and solve the critical issue, and that is what is there. And he has to have a self-respect and ethics. Without self-respect, if you can't respect yourself, you cannot respect anybody else, because then only you know the value of respect. And also, if you don't have some kind of ethics to stand, then you cannot make a choice which is rational and which is responsible. So design, that is what essentially is this. So design must be fun. So like this, it is only a prop for a table. So just making that post can actually satisfies its requirement. But because he is very creative, he also wanted to simulate some fun element into this. And because doing that, he enjoys that, and whatever that table or the element that has been used will always cherish that simple kind of deviation, spontaneity from the designers, and which will be always appreciated. So design, and we always say, believe me, there is a designer in all of us. Now, evolution of a design brief, how it is a dynamic model. So that is one thing what we have arrived at. That right from the day one, if I make the first sketch and think that I have arrived at it, I think we are wrong, because that line doesn't represent the client or the user's choices. That line is not been tested at the site. So design is always negotiation. So this is the kind of triangles within which all that negotiation can come down to. And finally, when everything is, we form, this is almost like a Sri Jantra. It is where the thing is getting that balance kind of scenarios, and that is the appropriate design for that particular task, for that particular time. So it is always a dynamic model, and acceptable design in harmony with the whole, so gainful and value added, and it should be always healing. We are almost like doctors in Ayurveda, who is not concerned with our health, who is also concerned with our well-being, with our soul. Now that is a kind of a task that designer always has. Now, when I'm saying this collaboration, this is a project, probably I'll discuss it later. It is in a small little village. There we are going to, basically it's next to an orphanage. We are going to build there. Now, we don't have a survey map. We don't have any other thing. We have only the site. We have some local persons who want to have that. So the best way to communicate them is what they understand very well is build up a model. So we actually sat in the site, help with the local craftsmen, and try to negotiate and work out a kind of a model which they can understand. Then that thing, when it is being transported into the site, how the various kind of connections, things that we can work. So we have to also learn how to make a mud wall, and in which form this mud wall gains the maximum strength. So these are all these small little elements which kind of enriches the final design, and this is the collaborative process through which the design always evolves. So as a designer, we might be able to take that the leadership, but it is a guided process. So being a conscious designer, we can always negotiate between all these, the very basic three stakeholders, the elements, the various choices, the influences of the external, and then finally chart out a path which will end up in building something that we all desired for. But we may not have that kind of an idea or prefix that this is what it is going to be. I think it's a huge talk. So let's now, because these are all very theories, now I am going to demonstrate two particular projects just to able to understand that when instead of talking about the building design or architectural design or interior or product design, why I was very keen on understanding the very basic understanding of the design as such. Because if we follow the same logic, we can apply it to its various forms and various products. That is the way we are going to experience that. Now, this Vithi Vidhan is incidentally built almost like 30 years back. Here, I have an advantage, and that is for actually explaining to the listeners is I've selected because here this is my own house. My client is my family, and I am also part of the user group. So the two stakeholders are very well interrelated, and the site is a kind of a given site which is actually given through the lottery. It's a very small 3.5 cut-up lot, 12 meters by 18 meters in Salt Lake. So the first constraint is Salt Lake has a bylaws, and within that bylaw, I have to construct this building. How much I can construct, that is also kind of given and determined. Now, that is a given constraint. The second constraint would be is what is the purpose of that? My mother told me that can you design a house for a Bengali family? Mind that I am not going to make a like Indian architecture, massive things, nothing of that sort. The preliminary prerequisite is very clearly given that give a house where a Bengali family can live. And Bengali family essentially is a kind of a joint family. So me, my brother, and my parents all living in this similar house. That is the first requisite. Can I design something like that? That is number one. So, and when she is talking about the family, that family means that we are not living in a vacant. So we have been living in an apartment. So so that means I have to take care of all the furniture that has been brought in, all the artifacts that has been brought in, the way of our life, everything has to be revolved in this house. See, that is the difference between a very informed user and otherwise a developer. These are the two basic parameters that we have a kind of an advantage, and that is why I thought to project this is to have a synergy of the thinking process. So with that, when we started doing this, now there is a very interesting thing in Salt Lake that you have a mandatory setback, which is minimum is 750, and on the other side it is 2.5. The front is fixed at 1 meter. Now you have to leave these spaces. But then my question is that why do I have to have a 750 wide passage, which is virtually of no use? If I am leaving that space, why cannot actually I use it like a khirki dwar in our old Bengali houses? So there is to be side entrance, but to have a side entrance, I at least need this 1.2 or 4 feet to gain an access. So these are, before actually getting into the site, these are the parameters that I am trying to figure out from the site itself. Okay. So from that site, so that is being decided. One thing we have realized in North Calcutta, it is the courtier typology house which performs best in our climate. Now the road is on the southern side, and so the maximum breeze and other thing we have, if we want a solar passive house, so I have to use my climatic consideration well. Now these are slowly kind of guiding the basic framework of the house. So that is decided that I have to have a secondary house, I have to have a uthon or a courtyard within around which my living spaces will go forward. Right in the front, there will be a public space. So we thought a simple dane will do. And we created a kind of a mezzanine and as an upper level where our living room is. And the bedrooms are already falling in the back. So we create enough kind of wind tunnel to be able to let the air pass through and make the house so that even the rear side bedrooms through the courtyard will be getting the southern breeze. This is the basic choices. So from that, then comes that this is the living room that we have created in front. Obviously, it's not a very big house. And so actually dimension wise is only a 9 foot 6 inches. But as in North Calcutta, there is this huge height. So this height is almost like 12.5 feet. So with that height, and then with the use of an open staircase, and which is also becoming a part of circulation, we just increase this living space feel much more. So it is very well lit. It is perfectly well done. Now, the second component is very nostalgia part of it. I have kind of got very old traditional house by restoration of those windows which are 8 feet by 4 feet high, and there are numerous windows that we have got. So while actually I was trying to carve out the living spaces, what have I done is create these windows and frames and create just basic shell so that all the other kind of activities can be put into. So this is the kind of a dining place, because in fact in most of Indian family house it is the dining place which is exactly the most of the family can bring around, which is inside the kitchen and all the things that is there. Then you have these huge windows. In fact, while doing that, cost was a major constraint because my father was only a professor. So we cannot really spend a huge lot of money to build this house. So we try to think that, okay, let us see how best we can reduce this. By reducing is, first and foremost, we have this completely load bearing structure. An internal wall, I have learned from Laurie Baker that with the small thin partition wall, but if it is constructed well, it can use as a storage and it can also become a structural main frame within which. So slowly structural design has come into scene. The product designers also, by doing that, I figured out that the conventional brickwork will not be very adaptable here. And because I need some kind of a hollow brickwork so as to lessen your heat load as well as the material cost. So I have to devise a kind of a brick panel wall. Now, these are the kind of innovations that is, and constraint is the mother of all innovations. So I was having this constraint, and thereby I am using the design logic to overcome with a more appropriate kind of solution. So slowly we are getting there. Then we thought in the indoor side, why do we need a frame at all for a door? A two pivot is good enough for a door to swing. So we removed all the frames from the internal doors. These are the ways we created more of openings and with kind of grills or jalis so that the air and everything can pass through the whole house. The staircase is, which is otherwise a kind of leftover space, it is becoming the major connecting part in the whole house. Sometimes it is a ventilated space and ventilated store below. Sometimes it is an extension of the living room, because when we do pujas and all that, this whole space is available to us. Or when you get into a simple bedroom like this, we thought of that ventilators, those kind of things which we have discarded from these things, but this is very much there in the vernacular style. So we adapted all those and created a very interestingly thing, and we have gone back on lime wash because this is something which actually strengthens the building, disinfects the building, and it is very cheap and very maintainable. This is also a part of our learning from the vernacular wisdom is that you don't think of a no maintenance kind of building because that is not possible in nature. So instead, if you can make a maintainable building and make it as a part of your building maintenance ritual, then the building lasts for much more and it always remains very new and fresh. So we just gone by those basic logic. So instead of really bombarded with the media campaigns and all that, we just apply our own logic, own sense, and what has been practical, which has been tested over the centuries, adapt those kind of things so that it can further prevail. Now, this is what we are thinking. Now, this is the south window, and this is the area through which there is a whole wind catcher inside the your courtyard. These are the bedrooms on that side. This is the bedroom here. So this is with this we have really created a logic. Even the form of the building is devised in such a way so the perimeter wall is not more than 18 feet high, and because of the slope roof, I can always bring in the eastern light right into the building or the southern light right into the interior. So even when every door windows is closed, you can still read a book sitting in the thing and thereby completely eliminating any kind of artificial lighting. So this is one. Now, having said that, I will be slowly getting into a more public kind of a building where the user is Monchasha, the client is Monchasha. It is promoted by Follow Tours and Travel Group and their counterparts who have also kind of worked us on UNDP projects for Incredible India campaign. So it is basically their idea. So now here the user group. So user group here uh, is not known. All that is known is the client and the designer, and between us we try to think is that what kind of program that we want to follow. The site is known. It is a very in the village Paushi. It is almost 150 kilometers from Calcutta in Kalyanagar, Paschim Mednipur. Now the access, and it is by the side of a Orissa Bengal canal, which is a tidal canal. It directly connects to the Khejuri. So this is a site. The site also belongs to a group called Antyodaya Ashram. It is an orphanage, almost about 60 children who are being brought up by this orphanage. So this project is initiated to help this orphanage because every now and then they actually have to figure out for grants for survival. So this project is kind of a generated project. So what we thought is, because our experience with Incredible India campaign, we thought that if we can really showcase this rural Bengal experience to the urbanites of Calcutta and around, that what really rural Bengal stands for, what is the kind of experience that you have, then probably we can bring in a good kind of a tourist circuit and which will then subsidize the Antyodaya Ashram. That is the thought with which, and funding is almost none there. So with that kind of thing, when we approach this site, so we have to be very flexible in the way of working it together. Now, what a tourist would want and what is the kind of Bengal experience that we can provide. Now, this is where our interpretation of the design brief started, that what will we showcase them. So first and foremost, what we thought is that why not have something which is extremely local. In fact, after COVID scenario, I think this is going to be one of a very particular model which can be adapted in villages, which will stand for local empowerment and local level. So with that idea and with the idea of your Incredible India campaign from Brahmaputra Valley, we have observed that in Brahmaputra Valley there is a typology called Chang typology, and which is mainly for the Brahmaputra floodplains. So if we can actually take that kind of an inspiration and build it somewhere here, then it will be fascinating. Now we don't have any survey, we don't have any other kind of gadgets. All is there. We have pen, pencil, compass, and we went there. We called the local craftsmen and we sat with there. We just don't have the brief. All the brief that we have is that that is from the Khorlo. They say that if we have to have a kind of a rural resort, at least we need 4 dormitories, 4 bedded each, so that altogether there will be almost like 16 to 20 people around, and that will be able to kind of make a threshold of activities. So whatever investment that we can put in, it can be cross subsidized. So fine, that is our basic parameter to start with. With that kind of attitude, when we started doing this, we just work out this kind of a very simple looking logic of the buildings. Now, this is a kind of a building that is the first task of, and this is for the common utility space. So one is a diagonal, is basically fit in on octagon, because octagon is very well used, is very close to the circle, but not the circle. But again, geometrically, it is easier to resolve, and it can withstand better any kind of cyclonic and any kind of other acts. So this is the basic parameter with which we started working. And then that is the ultimate translation of this house, which you can call a North Mandap, which we'll call a dining space, a Boithak space. It is served from a kitchen below. So altogether, this is the main live area where whoever comes to this rural resort will actually spend quite a lot of time. So it is meant to initiate a series of acts. And these are the kind of elements which are originally there, that heki, those elements that people used, how to threshen the rice, all these small totems, symbols, those which are narrated with the langol, everything with which the agricultural life of rural Bengal is kind of being associated, narrated, and utilized. In the furniture also, because now this is something, we don't have major windows. All we have is a bamboo platform and plain bamboo screen. So the water doesn't come in, but at the same time, it is always very airy. The thatch roof always helps to breathe. But there is this toilet. Now this toilet is kind of a modern, with the tiles and every other thing on the bamboo framing. And because we cannot compromise the health and hygiene, so we have to improvise with it. But even the furniture, everything is done with bamboo, which is very closely available, and it's not a problem. Even like where we have to have a basin, we use the normal their utensils. So because this is an associated value, and put a way to include within a mud, and created a very interesting detail. Now, creating this whole space is just the building or the structure. That is not the end of all. What we actually try to do is weave an experience of rural Bengal. Is that the family can come with their children and spend time. They can come with the elders and have a evening adda, chai sessions, all those things, which is kind of getting more and more absent from our regular daily life. Including, we thought to make it the experience very authentic, is how the cuisine will be served, what cuisine, what the menu will be, and who will cook them, and in what way it is going to be associated. It's all part of that single one-point experience creation. And in a tourism, all that we are actually celebrating and thereby marketing is this rural, absolute, authentic rural experience. So it also kind of brought back the old your culinary traditions that is available. It is giving the local population a new way to experiment. They take people around to roam around in the village in the bicycles. They take them to the fishing, angling, and all that. So that simple design of one village, or not even village, is a small resort, but it has triggered an enormous amount of experiences all around it, including the weaving, basketing, the kamars are there, the smith metals, the carpenters, everybody has kind of roam around. And then we have also interjected the local festivals like Bono Bibi and other Pachali and all the other kind of intangible traditions along with this building. So altogether, this is what is design. It is celebration of the whole, and that is exactly what is my idea of understanding of the design. And hope I have been able to kind of at least explore the windows. I mean, you are almost traveling by bus, so by your window, the series of scenarios are being unfolded for getting this unique experience. So design, I would say, is a living experience of shared values, of hope and destiny, and it also brings a sense of completeness for the present. With that, I thank you and conclude. Any questions? I'd be very happy to answer that.
Sir, my name is Orko and I'm a graphic design and animation student in iLEAD. Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Okay, sir, I have a question. So, I have been an enthusiast in design for a very long time, although I know very little. But this session has proved to be of very great importance to me. But my question is that in an initial phase, we were talking about the stakeholders of the designs, the design stakeholders and all of those things. So there comes a point when the negotiation keeps on happening to a point where there is a possibility of getting lost in a conversation. That the purpose is lost, and you know, the negotiation carries on till such a limit that, and also it's difficult to find like-minded people. Okay, so that even if you are very ambitious about a project, maybe your peers are not very ambitious about a project. That's why in the negotiation period, you get lost. So what is the decision that we should take on those lines?
Okay, Arpo, I think the point what you are saying is nothing is non-negotiable. Everything is it is a kind of a flexibility, because when in fact this has happened to me also. At one point in time, I have almost kind of withdrawn myself halfway because the client really didn't listen to me. Okay, so this is a kind of a situation we all have to come across. But as we have matured enough, now I also see that finally whoever actually commissioned you has a point, because he is commissioning it because he thought that you will be able to give him what he wants. So number one, that is the main problem. Most of the time when a graphic designer like Monchasha itself, we were grappling with the name. What is going to be the name? So in every idea, then finally what narrows down is that all we are basically cultivating the mind. So why not we are Chasha? That's no problem. If we can take that onus on us, and Chasha is one who really brings things out. So that is how we kind of click. So you have to be very argumentative. It's not really, you have to work out from your informed position. That is why I was saying, for whom you are designing, that is very important. Not who is giving you the mandate. If he has given you to make a graphic design for some project or something, you try and understand the purpose of that particular project, the actual mindset of that group, and then devise what will actually help your client to put that idea across. So you have to really break your own kind of frame or jackets that you have put in remove that, you will see there are many problems. The answer comes from the constraint. And in fact, we are now at a stage when we are saying retrofitting is good, because retrofitting will be new paradigm for development, because development always displaces. So if you have an old building and if you think breaking away that building is good enough, I think that's wrong. If I have a good building, if it is not performing, I'll do main to suit today's need without breaking them. That is the kind of, so there is a point where waste, you should be able to guide back the waste into your main line of thinking. Same way in wherever you find that this is a kind of thing that you cannot surmount, so you try and understand why you won't be able to negotiate beyond this. If you can understand that okay, probably my way of thinking may not be okay, so you change your tactics, you change your logic, you change your all parameters, and then you approach it in a way, because finally what you are going to give them, if it benefits your client, I don't think there is any client, because clients are not, they know exactly what is the kind of investment and what is the kind of return. So if your input actually helps them to gain a better return, they will always look at your object or your solutions more objective. Thank you very much. This is also a good opportunity for me to kind of share these broad things, which is kind of with me for quite some time. So I think we can further elaborate on this, further having other questions. It would really help. So if anybody has any kind of questions, you
Sir, I
can.
have another question. Can I ask you? When no one's asking, I am going to ask only. Since
Sure.
I'm the only one benefiting from it, I will be the only one benefiting from it.
Okay, no problem.
Sir, can you suggest some further readings on where to read more about the design principles or something like that? So maybe some books, maybe.
Now, this is a very, very, very interesting question, in a sense that if you want to look for design, then don't look at the design books. Look from something else who are similar, who are more kind of thought provoking, who will enrich your kind of understanding of generally why what works and why it doesn't work. And read, like Harari is a very interesting book. You can always look into that. There are couple of books, the Design for Happiness. This is an interesting book. So these are the kind of books you should read. Don't read the glossy magazines and other things, because they only suggest the end product. What actually you will be reading is which kind of intrigued you.
Right, sir. So basically, what I'm interested is basically what I'm trying to say is that what you kind of explained all throughout the presentation was a connection between the historical aspects of design and how it kind of affects the designs of the day and how it has evolved over time. So is it a kind of this kind of a disciplinary kind of mandate that we should be reading some amount of history to know what we exactly are doing in the discipline?
Definitely, any kind of book on ecology, on environment, on your design history. Actually, we are not paying a lot of attention to the history, because if you really look through your normal day-to-day vocabularies or the advertisements, even uh, like ONMs, there's a book a long time back. So if you read those kind of books, it will help you to open up your own mind, and you try to look similar things in other disciplines as well. Like in this case, what I thought is I have actually benefited quite a lot from listening to one Ayurveda class and lecture, and the way they actually try to connect between the souls, between the well-being, and the way they approach the whole system, which are very similar to that. So read those, read on behavioral sciences. These are the way why people do something, because people are, they are a product of pattern. So everybody has certain very basic human values, and they always follow that instinct to the great whole. So if you can really look into those aspects, I think you will find your own answers.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. So one more question, sir. So it
Mhm.
is that, so basically I understand that you are from much more of a space design and architecture background. So I am much more of a visual communication student. So in that case, I understand that India kind of lacks identity based on visual communication. I mean, if we think about New York for say, like per se, let's say that graphic design kind of springed out of the modern times. Okay, it is a byproduct of modernism. So that's why we can completely identify, you know, this New York by its street signs, the typographic messages, all of those things. So there is no visual identity or a cohesive identity that goes into forming India as a whole. Do you have any thoughts on this, sir?
Yeah, okay. In fact, my major breakthrough came in when I designed first Clarion College of Communications, and then the Bates, India, and thereafter I designed ONM, Rediffusion, all the advertising gurus. That is what I have actually done it. The major problem is not really the way you are thinking. What you are thinking is you're not thinking in the right kind of mindset. When Rangan actually does a copyright, or Rituparno did the copyright thing, because he understood the mindset of a Bengali. And that is when he responded to that core. It is that understanding which helps him to really find his own thing. You are not copying somebody's idiom or somebody's practice. You have to find your own kind of language in own kind of things. I know my son is also being a part of disappearing dialogues. I think Navina is already there. They are doing art for mass, art for living, and they are basically trying to build workshops of a different communication. So you have to figure out for whom you are designing this communication, and what they want to you want to message, and how best way to message them. Shekha Gopal, she is working in Bangalore. She is doing a lot of work on your wildlife, and she is using the local vernacular and bringing out something like that. Amitabh Ghosh is talking about the Jungle Book, which is nothing but Bonobipisupakhan. So you have to really broaden your spectrum and really feel that within your heart as how you want to connect it. First thing is it has to stir you. Then only you will be finding an answer. Nobody is going to give you an answer.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, Tapan. Yeah,
Excuse me,
right.
sir.
So Anjan, there are two questions. They are slightly they're not connected. So I'm just asking so that in one go. One was that you did mention that in your house, in many of the internal doors you could happily remove the door frame, right?
Right.
So my question here was that does it have any issues regarding sound transfer from one room to the other room? So that was, I mean, so that's, I mean, visually there wouldn't be a problem, but does the sound sort of move, and does that make any trouble for the people of the house? That was question number one. Question number two was that we seem to be studying history definitely in architecture, in urban design, in other fields of design. But I think that what we don't study at all is the cultural aspects, culture, which is actually the human being. And so do you think that it is that which is lacking in our education and therefore in our practice? So these are the two questions.
The first question, Tapan, this is a major kind of problem, that sound, actually internal doors is basically like kitchen door or the bedroom door or any other door. How much in an Indian house that sound privacy do matter? Practically, it doesn't matter at all. So that is one of the thing. In fact, even today, when we were designing school, they were saying that it has to be soundproof. I was really aghast because I cannot really fathom out why because in our school we learn from our seniors, from the hallas in the next class. That is what teaches us more than these. And so this is the very notion of privacy to a great extent. I think it is a kind of a problem with the mindset, and this problem doesn't exist in as you go down the elite form. It really doesn't matter. That is one. And second is, your thing is, we actually don't study history for the history's sake. The way Harari studies history, or the way we have to study architectural history, has to be very different, because we only study that somebody has given somebody this style. We are basically talking about the style. We are not really, the building style comes last. It is the way of building something, the way you put together. There is a whole lot of social cultural aspect to it, the material availability of it, the skill of it, or the local wisdom of it. All that actually doesn't come forth. So when we study architecture, we should study from these anthropological, social, and cultural angle, because that is giving us more clues to design, not the physical attribute of it. Because ultimately, I am not going to construct that house myself. For that, I need Sambabu or Horibabu to do it. But I have to identify that Horibabu who is expert and who understands that material much better than I do. All I can do is I can help him in expanding his knowledge further. And that is way of giving it. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. I am an aspiring student of architecture, and in your session, you have told us about the client and the user relationship. So, how much of a role do you think, like every client is going to be unique? So, how much of a role do you think does human psychology play in architecture? Like, does the person who is doing the project, does he need to be educated in psychology too?
No, this is something which is lacking in our design profession. Mainly, we actually are a kind of a very service oriented group. We are like old traditional Sthapati is supposed to be a Vedagya, Shastrik. These are the kind of, he is a philosopher. I mean, that is the kind of notions that he has to have. You're saying is the user psychology, because if you're, suppose you want to design a low cost housing, so you have to know exactly what is the kind of group they have, what are the people who are going to come there. You study a low income group and get the direct relationship, how they use spaces, what are the spaces, what are the requirement, that is very essential. So you build up your own values and own requirement standards for design, because client ultimately saying that, okay, how many units that I can fit in, that's all, or what is the total cost. But if you also know how, what are the kind of space that they can you use more the circulation space for something which this low income group can do. So your attitude towards solving this housing problem will be somewhat different. It will have a social concern, but that is your design agenda. That might not be a client's agenda at all. But when you argue to it that why your project is more viable, then actually these arguments come in handy. Because finally, if that project is popular or that project is implementable, that is exactly the client needs. They need an implementable project within time frame without much of a hitch. And also for the, if the beneficiaries are good, at least they are making a goodwill. So it's a kind of a direct relationship.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I just want to ask you that as we are into, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. As we are into this green sustainable building development, building design nowadays, so can you please, and you are into this designing, so can you please enlighten us with this, because students are doing these things
No,
now.
I didn't get your questions clearly.
Actually, I'm just asking, trying to ask that as we are into this green sustainable building design,
Mhm.
Can you enlighten us with screen design and building development, how you are going through it? The students are learning these things nowadays.
Practically, the problem is what I find all the design students, be in architecture or interior or other things, it's a kind of a learning only skill set. And it is not really addressing to the thinking process. What we are really lacking is in terms of intelligent discourse and taking the responsibilities. The way actually designers are failing today, it's because we are not really there to take the responsibility of our own work. And that is something we always think that, okay, contractors will be able to implement this or somebody or something. And we are leaving this charge to project managers and all that sorts who doesn't know a thing about the projects. So this is the problem. That is what is happening in our design profession. So we have to really become the designers, not draftsmen. And we are not there who are like doing packaging for some industries. So, and the way it is becoming there that all manufacturing units are almost using designers as their packagers. This is something like carton packaging, the facade. This is something like that. So where we are concerned, we are not really delivering our things together. So that is why I think that we first of all is we have to invest more in learning, more develop more sensitivity, and really think and become argumentative to be able to be valued by other people, even the clients, that here is somebody who can give us some kind of a directive which will help, not just spend an expenditure and ultimately raise a bill. This is where we have to shift that mindset.
Sir, this is Orgo again, sir. Hello.
Yes, Argo.
Sir, I think I'm bothering you with my stupid questions, but sorry for this. But the
No,
thing
no,
is
there's
that,
no problem. The
yeah,
more question you ask, is better.
yeah. The thing is that, so I know that Satyajit Ray was one of the, when he is considered to be the foremost like forerunners of graphic design in India. Okay, he
Right.
designed his own. He designed 4 of his own typefaces. Okay, and all of those things. So I am also an aspiring type designer, but the industry in India, like the design industry in India, I think they don't value certain aspects of designing, as in like type designing or typography, okay, per se, or package design or something like that. These things get kind of, marginalized over greater design disciplines. So, what do you have an advice for this situation?
In fact, Clarion, Satyajit Ray was there in the Clarion. So I've seen his typeface. If you look at Satyajit Ray's posters or his graphic communications, including all his Feluda stories and their illustrations, you will get an inspiration from him closely if you see how he is connecting with his audiences or his readership, or communicating that. If you take Devi's poster for that matter, the way it is been designed, it kind of projects the inherent value of Devi. So if you, before you jump into whether I will be doing a type design or something, it is not essential, because first and foremost you have to be happy and excel in whatever project that comes in your way. You cannot preset something that I will do a type design or I do this thing. If you are thinking of making graphic design, use it the way you can improve somebody's thought or work, or communicate that message first. First you concentrate on that, then you will see that what particular skill set you need to do, and then accordingly you can flourish from there. Satyajit never learned graphic design. It's a
So
kind
he
of a,
was a student of Kolabhavan, I guess.
yes, he is a
Yeah.
student of Kala Bhavan. That is basically painting grammars, artist languages. It's basically art. What is art? Art is actually the way you connect with with an idea and abstracting it, right? That is what is art. And then sometimes you use it to protest, sometimes you use it to articulate, sometimes to you conceptualize an abstraction. This is what the art form is. So when you are actually thinking that you are taking a graphic design, you try and see what is the core strength of a graphic designer, how you can make a change. Then, and in whatever project that come in, you act towards making that change. If you take one step together, that will be your learning experience.
One of my students want to ask, her microphone is not working.
Mhm.
She wants to ask you that among all your projects, which one is your personally favorite, and can you tell us some specific points why that project is favorite to you? Yeah, actually, I just wanted to ask that which one is your favorite project among all the projects you have done?
Oh, this is something very big. I enjoy every project. And I have made it a point that whatever project that comes in my way, I will be enjoying it. So there
And
is no
maybe
single.
some interesting thing that you want to
All of them, any project, if take any, I mean, you can definitely go to my website. You can see all the projects that I've done. Is basically there is something of my own involvement or engagement is maximum. Sometimes it to chart out a completely new way of looking at it. Sometimes it is solving a particular problem. I mean, you name it. I think identifying problem is what I enjoy most.
yeah. Design is actually a challenging job,
And,
and
and, and in fact,
it is
every
interesting.
project, if you are really involved, and if you can think that by your effort you can make a little change, it is immensely satisfying.
Yes, yes.
And so I don't have to really see that only one project I will approach it in one way. In other project, I will approach completely in other way.
I
I'm
have been
extremely
to your
flexible, and that is why I don't have any style or anything. I mean, that is why we are appropriate alternative, not Anjan Mitra.
I have been to your Monch Asha. This is really a nice project. It's
It is.
really a,
In fact, your
good place to
iLEAD
stay.
Creative Campus is also an exciting project.
Yes. Yes.
That is the way it is being conceived, the way it is being put together. I think this is a hugely satisfying project.
I wanted to ask that post COVID-19, how do you see that design could play a role to build resilience within the society, within communities? What could be the role? What would you advise youth of today? How could design play a role to build resilience?
I think, Navina, the first thing is design definitely can play a role if it really kind of get out of its straight jacketed way. The first and foremost, we have to understand all these marginal areas, marginal people who are residing there and who are mostly devastated. They are not only people in the namesake. They always have some kind of a capacities on their own, and they are resilient enough if you can trigger that kind of a clue or guidance. So if you, as a designer, if you know that they are doing something in some way, and you can only advise that, okay, this is another way of doing it. I think doing that by hand and helping them out will create a far better resilience because you already have a workforce who are interested to work. So what is stopping you? If you have a fallen branch of the tree, might as well use it. If you don't have a drinking water, use tarpaulin sheet, hang it from poles, and make it as a reservoir. These are the ways one has to kind of create solutions for them on spot. And that is a way to design because they can think that, okay, in this kind of a circumstances, this is a way forward. And this is the way you can connect. Rest of the things people automatically have within them. I mean, yesterday there was people who came to cut our trees. He is nothing but a painter situated in a village very close to in Sundarbans. So he said, because we are in the village, we have to carry out a lot of things on our own. So if they have that kind of a knowledge, all we have to understand what knowledge they have, what resources they have, and we are there to connect it.
So the designer plays the role of a catalyst in the connecting
Exactly.
these.
Designer here
Yeah.
plays a role of a catalyst and also help them seeing a ideation and visualizing that, because a designer is trained to do that. That in this kind of a circumstances, what kind of special arrangement that you can do and how you can negotiate, because Amphan is also an opportunity of restructuring, which is
True.
otherwise is not possible, because now there is a collective which is at work. So if we can really connect them, guide them, and give them a better vision, and also give them a rationale why you are thinking this, you will see a lot of wisdom will come from them, and finally you will arrive at a design decision, and that will be cheaper, most effective.
And do you think that design in the current times has moved away from the socio-spatial realities, and we need to establish these connections further? Like, would you advise the youth? What would be your advice to the youth to make these connections? Because I think
Exactly.
that's most important.
This is what is required, because now to me a designer should not be seeking a kind of a job in the offices. They should try and make their get in directly involved with those people who really need their service. These are the people who really are waiting for the designers to come and help them out, and which we are not doing.
So how can
I
we
think
go
that's
about doing that? I mean, through social media or something like that? I mean, what are the ways, practical ways of going about doing that?
It's simple. When Navina is saying that, these are the kind of NGOs who are actually working with this kind of schools, marginal communities in those areas. They are making art camps and all that. By doing that, their first target is the school children and their seniors. So this is a very good way to kind of tag along with some kind of community-based organizations who are really interested to do something, and then you offer your services, and by getting it implemented, your fees will also be justified. That is not a problem. And definitely it's not an honorary kind of a engagement, it's a professional engagement. Do a professional job. You are talking about graphic design, when why not you really take the plight, because nobody is documenting their real scenarios in these areas. So get
Sir,
involved.
even though, sir, there are no possible avenues of exposure. I mean, I was talking about this from the very beginning, that the lack of the community feeling of designers in Kolkata is one of the worst things that I, as a design enthusiast, feel. I mean, I might not have been exposed to the right community. That can be one thing. Secondly, my work might just be as bad as anything, that people might not want to bring me into the community. Second thing, or maybe third, fourth, and maybe a lot of things like that. But the lack of a community feeling, the lack of a structure in this feeling, right? So that is a very frustrating point of departure.
It is not frustrating. First and foremost, I have already told you that if you are trying to figure out that there will be more of that designers who will be looking in this kind of work, it is not there. You don't have to look to your fraternity. You look to other fraternities who are really giving your relief to this kind of remote villages and all that. Tag along with Ramakrishna Mission, tag along with disappearing dialogues, tag along with other groups who are interested to do this kind of work. Why don't you get into them, get involved, and also make your contribution relevant?
Right, sir. I understand. So basically, you're saying that you have to actually step out of the house, bear
Exactly.
the heat of the sun, get some rashes on your face, and actually do the job.
Do it.
That's the thing.
That is the only way a designer can do.
So basically, I've actually been working on restoration of a few Indic scripts recently, like a few Bangla scripts. I have trying to make those digital. So I'm not finding anyone to, you know, this is not a single man project. It's a huge project around like 6 to 7 months. And I can't do it alone with the technical kind of limitations that I have. So all of these kind of, you know, very frustrating.
That is true. That if you embark on something which is not really required at this moment, then it is then you have to really
Yeah,
get
it's
a
like a
energy
passion
for
project,
your-
sir. Yeah, it's a passion project kind of a thing, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, you have really got good ideas about designs and everything. Thank you. Thank you, sir.